Hi there fellow gurus, you're here on Kit Guru with me Christina to take a look at the MSI Clutch GM41 Lightweight Wireless mouse, and you would be right in thinking you may have heard that name before, as MSI previously released the GM41 as a wired version. So today we will be looking at what that new version has to offer and if it's worth its price of $69.99. So let's start with what we get in the box. Not a lot, if I'm honest. The mouse itself, the charging dock with the removable USB dongle, the manual and a braided detachable 2-meter cable that plugs into the charging dock or the mouse itself for charging or using as a wired mouse. The cable ends in a USB-A connection and connects to the charging dock via a micro USB. Yes, in 2021, we are still seeing this outdated tech making its way into current times, which is a little bit disappointing. Moving on to the cable itself though, it's a tight, thin, stiff braid. It literally feels like garden wire wrapped in a braid because it's really easy to make into shapes and also, okay, pretty easy to take the kinks out again, but it doesn't really go straight because of how pliable it is. It doesn't catch on the desk though, so that's a plus. The cable plugs into the underneath of the dock, and this is a little bit fiddly as there really isn't that much room for your fingers to push the cable in. However, the cable routing cutout does mean it sits nice and flat when it is connected. I found that lining it up and pushing it in from the outside of the dock is the easiest way of really getting that in there. Also, another thing I felt a little bit fiddly is the stiff USB dongle when you're taking it out of the dock itself, but this is a plus in a way as hopefully it won't fall out easily. Also, you can use the dongle straight into your PC without the dock, and this is great if you want to use your mouse when traveling. You won't really want to be lugging around a massive charging dock everywhere. The USB dongle is nice and small and much more convenient. You can also store the USB dongle itself in the mouse by inserting it into the slot where the cable goes. I think that's pretty neat. When the mouse is on the dock though, it sits on gold prongs, which creates an almost store-like display for the GM41 Wireless, and it sits at an angle and looks as if it's floating. This is very similar to the Razer Viper. The shape itself is also pretty similar too. Talking of shape, it is exactly the same as the wired GM41, low and symmetrical. It has side buttons on the left-hand side, which means that it's not meant as an ambidextrous mouse. There is also slight thumb and pinky support on the sides. The hump is pretty low though, and as I said before, very similar to the Razer Viper. Grip-wise, you can end up with quite a bit of your hand hanging off the back of the mouse onto the mat itself, and this is either a positive or a negative depending on how much friction you like to play with. But for me personally, I prefer a higher hump so that I can use palm or claw grip without too much drag. The MSI GM41 has a slightly thinner and longer back end and body than the Viper. This allows you to have the choice to move into grips and positions with less or more friction. If you use fingertip grip or claw grip though, I think you will find this extra comfortable. But to be honest, all grips are pretty comfortable if you're okay with the level of friction that comes with each. The shape is something I'm sure some people will like and others may not so much. This mouse is 130.1 x 67 x 38.3 millimeters, which is the same as the wired version, and it has a weight of 74 grams, which is an increase of 9 grams from the old one. My hands are around 6.5 inches, and the width and size is fine for me with my small hands, but the length does make it slightly tricky for me to reach those side buttons. However, this is a usual thing for me, and very few mice accommodate my short thumb. Some of the details on here are much the same, with the dragon logo on the mouse hump, which is lit up with the RGB. On the sides there are the same embossed patterns on a rubber finish to create the grip, just the same as the old GM41. On the mouse body and the left and right click there is satin plastic, and it has a slightly metallic finish with silver flecks mixed into the black. Again, the same as the wired. The one thing that is different is the USB slot. This is obviously so that you can use it as a wired mouse, but because the mouse is so light, the cable is quite stiff as well. I did find that sometimes you get a lift on the mouse if the cable is at a certain angle, for example. Don't get me wrong, nothing that you can sort out with a bit of hand weight or maneuvering, but it's worth a mention nonetheless. Build quality wise, things haven't changed too much from the original either, and unfortunately you still have the flex on the side, which engages those side buttons. But pushing down on the top doesn't engage or flex, which is something at least. This is disappointing in my opinion, and I'm sure that Kit Guru aren't the only ones to have pointed this out in the past. It's kind of just gone ignored here, and I would have liked to have seen this improved in the newer version. Whilst I was having a good squeeze to test the mouse's strengths, I thought I would have a look inside to see the switches. The left and right buttons have Omron D2FC FKs with a 60 million click lifespan, and these feel exactly the same to the GM41 wired older version. And that's probably because they're the exact same D2FC FK Omrons. But in comparison to, say, the Viper, which has Razer opticals, the Omrons are a little more clickier, very slightly higher tactility in the actuation too. The GM41 switches have very little pre and post travel and also sound pretty satisfying too. So here's a sound test for you with the GM41 wireless on the right, the Viper in the middle, and the GM41 wired on the left. The side buttons or the back and forward buttons are located on the left side of the mouse, and they are gloss black plastic. They feel slightly less clicky than the left and right click, but not spongy by any means. The mouse wheel has a tire effect grip running all over it. This is really easy to use, and the increments are small with a low amount of resistance. This, however, did lead me to overshoot at times when playing, but it's kind of a common issue I find, and it is down to personal preference as well. There is another texture running around the mouse wheel, and this is that stippled effect matte plastic. This continues to the underside of the mouse as well. The bottom is very different to the original in that we can see the 6 white glide pads. Also, we have 2 switches. The one on the left is the on-off switch, and the one on the right is the DPI button. If you press the DPI button, you can see the RGB logo blinks and changes colour. And this is depending on what setting you're on. This is great as you can change on the fly and you know exactly what setting you're on, if you can remember what the colours mean. You also can see on the bottom where the charging dock connects, we have those golden contacts as mentioned earlier. In the middle of the base, you can see the sensor peeking out, and that is the Pixar PAW3370. And this is an optical sensor. It has 400 IPS and 1000 Hz to 1 millisecond polling rate and a max DPI of 20,000 with software. This is different to the wired version in the fact that it had a Pixar PMW3389 and in turn has an increased DPI. But other than that, there really isn't much different compared to the wired version. And whilst we're talking about the sensor, I thought I'd do a lift-off distance test using both the low and the high lift-off distance settings, which can be accessed through the software. Starting with the GM41 wireless on low lift-off distance, the sensor stops reading at 1 disc height. On high, it stopped reading at a 2 disc height. I would say that this is kind of ideal in terms of what I would expect to see from each of those settings, and this is exactly the same for the lift-off distance on the wired GM41 too. Before we move on to the software, I just wanted to mention the battery. MSI claim 80 plus hours of gaming and around 200 hours general use. Over 2 days general use and a couple of hours of gaming myself, it dropped to around 88%. I left the mouse on overnight as well during my use and had the RGB on full to just really get an idea of how it could handle being on for long periods. It also doesn't have an auto off facility or sleep, so you must remember to turn it off with a switch underneath if you want to preserve the battery. Without turning it off at all for the whole time, I got roughly about a week out of this mouse, but obviously this is kind of worst case scenario as I left the device on all night for the whole time on full RGB and brightness. Charge wise from dead, it started charging at around 9:30 AM and it was about 100% charge at around 11:15. MSI claim that you can charge from 0 to 100% in just 90 minutes for up to 80 hours of usage on a full charge, which I would say is pretty much accurate as the above times kind of show. Just a quick mention too, software wise, when you connect your mouse for the first time, if you try opening the software in wireless mode, it will ask you to plug in the cable to check for a firmware update. And once you've done this, you can come to the gaming mode screen. This picks up what games you have installed and it also helps free up memory. You can read all about it here. Then at the top, we have the MSI device. Click that and then the MSI GM41 Wireless, and this will open up the buttons page where you can change button functionality and macros and stuff like that. Then you have your profiles in the top left, which you have 3 of, and if we go to the sensor tab, we can see the polling rate, liftoff distance, angle snapping, motion sync, and on the right, the DPI slider. This can be customized for the 5 DPI stages, and of course you can see the battery level underneath. Now, gaming wise, I popped on Call of Duty as usual and had a few games. The GM41 Wireless is still nice and light regardless of it being slightly heavier than its predecessor, but that low hump just doesn't feel as comfortable for me as a higher hump. After playing for a long time in palm or claw grip, it just makes my hand uncomfortable and doesn't really give me the support I need. This is the same as I mentioned before in my previous review for the wired GM41. Just in case you were wondering, no, there wasn't any jitter or lag when I was gaming on wireless, and it was completely fine. There was really no issues with it at all. It was quite a smooth experience. I did plug the cable in to see what it would be like to play and charge at the same time, and luckily the stiff cable didn't really affect me too much, but you can notice it in comparison to it being wireless, and obviously it's better, and this is the intended purpose basically. I am used to a much heavier, slower mouse though, so for people who are used to lightweight mice, this could be a little too much resistance for you, but in a pinch, it's something most of us would probably be willing to put up with. In conclusion, I believe the new Clutch GM41 wireless mouse by MSI hasn't really changed an awful lot, and it offers little that we haven't either seen before or currently seen for a similar price by someone else. Considering that you get the GM41 wired for around $43.99, is it worth it? Some might say because of the sensor and the fact that it's now wireless, it would be worth it. But you could purchase the Corsair Qatar Pro Wireless, which is $44.99. It provides a cheaper option, but okay, there are a few places that it lacks in specs in comparison. You can check out the full review of that here on KitGuru. Also, there is the Asus ROG Gladius 3 for $99.98 if you have the budget to spend a little bit more, and you'll get so much more in terms of specs, and you can connect up to 3 different devices at the same time. Other than competition though, it was just so disappointing to see that there is still the same build issues that there was in the wired GM41. It would have been really nice to see an improvement here. All in all, I feel like there are very few adjustments, and this is almost like a copy and pasted version of the wired GM41. For that reason, I won't be rushing out to get this one, but if you are on a budget, then the fact that it's wireless and the specs will get the job done means that the GM41 Clutch Wireless gaming mouse may be the one for you. So anyway, let us know down in the comments what you think and whether you're excited to get this one or not. Ring that bell, hit that sub button, and check out our merch. Don't forget that our website is updated daily with tech news. This is KitGuru. I'm Christina. See you next time.